All right, it's time to discuss what I believe is to be the most important element of this entire program. Without grouping, it's pretty impossible to move around, and I'll get into why. I'll show you some examples of how not grouping can really ruin your time with this program in a minute. But first things first. We're just going to get into the nuts and bolts of it. I'm using the model for navigation file again, so go ahead and open that up if you want to follow along and kind of see for yourself how this works. I'm going to just click using my select tool on a few different things. Let me go ahead and zoom in on these two 2D objects. So I'm going to go to my zoom tool. I'm just going to zoom in on them. In fact, while I do this, I'll use my zoom window here and just bring those real close up. So go to my select tool again. You'll notice the difference between these two items here is that one of them is basically a series of connected lines and a field, a face in between those lines. The lines connected basically make that face. This one, when I click on it, I get a blue boundary around the entire thing. What this is this tells me that this is a grouped shape. And the best way I can explain what a group is a group is basically an invisible protective envelope that's either two-dimensional or three-dimensional depending on what your object is, that is protecting your geometry within so that everything doesn't stick together. So if I double click on this, do you notice how everything else around me, go ahead and zoom out a little bit, everything else around me in the file just fades to the background. What this means is that this is now an open group. So now when I click, if I go to my select tool and click on these individual items, what happens when I click on them is it's acting the same way that this one was when when I was clicking on it and it was ungrouped. So if I click out in space again, that's closing the group. The other way I can close the group, let me go ahead and double click on it again to open it up. So to open up this group, I have to double click on it. I can right click out in space and then click close group again. So two ways to close the group are either just double click out of it or right click and close it. Here's another example of a 3D object that's ungrouped. So this guy is just a series of lines in 3 dimensions that are connecting, causing faces to appear. Here we have a grouped object. So if I double click on that, I've just now opened the group, and now it's acting in the same exact way. And I'm going to get into why this makes sense or why this is so important in a second. But first things first, let's talk about how to group something. So I'm going to go ahead and use my rectangle tool, click once on that, and draw out in the field, not touching anything else, a rectangle. I'm not really worried about the dimensions so far. Go to my select tool, double click on this, and then right click and go down to make group. Not make component, we'll do components later, but for now we're just going to make this a group. So when I click make group, that is now made into a group. Every single time I make any shape at all that starts out as a 2D shape, I always make it a group right away and then close the group. This is something that I want you to get in the habit of right from the very beginning, and you'll see down the road why this is going to be so helpful. So now I can open this up and see that this is now a grouped object that I can now interact with as if it's ungrouped within the shell of that group. So I'm going to click out again, and let's try it one more time. So I start with a rectangle, click once in the field, finish the rectangle, go back to my select tool, double click on this, then right click on the whole thing and go down to make group, click. It's that simple. Now let's talk about why we want to make something a group. Before we can do that, we need to get into moving and copying, and then we're going to jump back into why making something a group is so important after that. So get comfortable once or twice, make a few groups, and just get a feel for how that works, and we can move on to the next video, and you'll learn how to move things around and copy them.